Release and follow-through. The words go together in everybody's mind, but they are often separate actions. They have separate driving forces and separate purposes. There are many variations of the release and follow-through, and many of them are successful. But there are some guiding principles that make some combinations better than others. Here we will study the release and the follow-through and develop an understanding of what to strive for and what to avoid. Let's start with the classic release and follow-through. In this case, the release and the follow-through are combined into a single action. At the point of release, the archer pulls straight back. The aft action of the draw hand is not just a natural response to the tension being severed at the string, but the archer often pulls with an extra force at the point of release, and the hand is encouraged to go the full natural range of travel, usually ending up somewhere behind the neck or on the shoulder. Let's look at an excellent example of this release. This is a very good release used successfully by archers worldwide. The archer starts with proper alignment and ensures that the hand is pulling straight back. At the point of release, the archer continues pulling and brings his hand straight back as far as possible. Only at the end does the archer allow his hand to change course because of basic physiology and body geometry. But this is long after the arrow is gone and in no way affects the flight of the arrow. Many archers around the world use this technique with amazing success. It is a very well proven technique. The only notable flaw in it is that right at the point of release, the archer changes his pull by giving the extra force. It allows for a variable error to creep in. In the classic release, the release and the follow-through are merged. But the fact is that the release and its response and the follow-through are often two separate things. They have different driving forces, different purposes, and often completely different results. If we take out the extra effort that is added at the point of release, we are left with just the natural response. What does this mean? At full draw, the archer is holding against the draw weight of the bow. If he did no other action at the point of release except let go of the string, the body would snap to a new position in the direction in which it was pulling. This natural snap resulting from the severing of the grip is the natural response. Most archers take the action further with some additional muscular effort and add a follow-through. With this effort, they carry the hand to some predetermined position. Sometimes the force for the follow-through is applied at the point of release, as in the case we just saw, and sometimes it's a completely separate activity, as in the case of these two archers. Notice how our first archer does his release in one direction, then pulls his hand in a completely different direction for his follow-through. Clearly, it is an unrelated and completely different activity. In the case of our second archer, it is just a benign pulling in the same direction with the same muscles. If the archer does nothing else but release and let his body flow as it wants to, then his follow-through is only the pure and natural response to the release. Depending upon the force and the stresses at the time of the release, the body will snap to various positions, but the response will be pure and natural. Much like pulling on a string and then suddenly cutting it. The body snaps to a new position under the release of the string tension. If we do this release with no extra action, then we have the pure response, which tells us exactly how we were pulling at the time of the release. This type of release is used successfully by many archers worldwide also. Let's watch this archer as she performs this release admirably. Notice how the hand stops short, about the side of the neck. This is where the natural action and the back tension brings the hand. Any further travel is artificial and not part of the natural response. There is no follow-through, there is no extra action. She simply lets her hand travel to where it is pulling and then stops. Many times the archer will move his hand as a delayed follow-through, merely as an unrelated action, but the release response is pure and natural. Many archers have extreme follow-throughs that take the hand and the arm far beyond the normal range. The goal in this is to ensure that the hand flows correctly upon release. It rarely accomplishes its goal. If the action is part of the release, it has much more room for errors. Often, however, it is a separate action after the release and does not affect the shot or the release at all. It merely makes the archer feel like he is going straight through the shot. This is a standard two-part release. The after action can be unrelated in any positive way, but it can complicate the entire release process. Often the follow-through can be quite complex and require a series of coordinated activities that bring the hand to any of a number of predetermined and unimportant places. The old Eastern European technique took this to extremes. With work, the technique can be very successful, but it has much potential for errors. Here we see an archer using this dropped elbow follow-through. Notice how much activity must be coordinated at the bow arm to keep the hand movement consistent. The hand releases and the arm moves back under the back tension. Then the elbow is pulled down using the side muscles, and the arm is rotated and the hand continues its afward motion well past the shoulder. It can be made to work, but it is a far more complex activity than it has to be. And it allows much room for error. Watch it once again and note how difficult the coordination is as compared to the classic or the natural releases that we observed earlier. Failure in any activity can throw this whole release out of control. And when it goes wrong, it goes way wrong. The other problem with all of these complex and add-on follow-throughs is that they are often misleading. Just because the hand starts at one position and ends in another position does not mean it went through the straight line to get there. For many archers, the hand often moves in many different directions before it arrives at its final destination. But the archer only knows the starting and finishing point, so he believes that his action was simple and straight. Not only does the added follow-through not do what it was intended to do, it can even mislead the archer into believing that he did something he did not do. Watch this archer as he releases one way and then moves his hand to a completely different place. Because of where he started and finished, he believes that he did a perfect straight back release. But we saw different. Watch the action again in slow motion. His hand followed this course, but you would have a hard time convincing him that it did not follow this course. Not only did the extra follow-through not help his release, but it did worse. It misleads him into believing that he did a good release. The feedback is artificial and wrong. Let's look at another archer and we can see the misleading follow-through again. On first glimpse, the shot looks pretty good. The hand seems to go straight back. It started at one point and finished at another. And the archer believes that is what he did. But in slow motion, we can see that the hand did not follow a straight path. It came clear up into the cheek and then back down to the shoulder. But the extreme follow-through action leads him to believe that he made a straight and good release. Let's look at this archer, and we can see the cover-up by his follow-through. He plucked his release, but he would never believe it based upon his follow-through and where he ended up. Once again, not only did the follow-through not do its intended job, but it did worse. It misled the archer about what really happened. The final release that many people do is the dead release. Nobody teaches this release as a viable technique, but lots of people do it. In the dead release, the archer gives up back tension exactly at the moment of release. There is no natural snap follow-through because at the point of the release there is no tension pulling on the hand. This is why the hand stays in place at the point of anchor when he releases. Sometimes the archer covers up the dead release by doing an add-on follow-through, but the follow-through is completely unrelated to the release and the release is still dead. The big problem with the dead release is that exactly at the point of release the archer changes everything. He drops back tension and all of this muscular activity must be perfectly coordinated. If he drops his back tension too late, he does sort of a normal release. If he drops his back tension too early, disaster. Watch this archer as she struggles with the dead release technique. As you can see, she did a dead release. Her hand stayed still on the release. She then added on a follow-through because that is what she'd been taught to do. She would not believe that she dropped all her back tension upon the release, but she did. That is why there was no snap in her hand movement upon release. That was one of her good synchronized releases. On her next shot, she does not synchronize the activities so well. She lets up on the back tension too soon, and watch what happens. Let's look at that again in slow motion. She lets up the back tension and the hand is pulled forward. Somewhere in there she lets go of the string and pulls back with her unrelated follow-through. Needless to say, she was not pleased with that shot. There are many techniques for the release and the follow-through, but they all can fall into one of the four categories that we discussed here. The classic release and follow-through, the dead release, the release and extended follow-through, and the natural release. These releases all had their successful practitioners, but they also have inherent and potential flaws. The classic release and follow-through is probably the most successful technique worldwide, but it often requires extra action right at the point of release, and this requires careful but not too difficult synchronization. The dead release is a disaster waiting to happen. It requires the dropping of back tensions synchronized with the release. The release and extended follow-through requires extra action that is unrelated to the release, and it can be very misleading. And the natural release. In this release, no extra activity is required. The archer simply lets the body snap to the natural tensions at the point of release. When it's all over, he knows exactly how he was pulling. This is the simplest, most natural, and most unaffected release. The archer does no other activity, there is no extra activity to coordinate, and the follow-through is pure and clean. It tells the archer exactly where the release was going. This is why it is the best release.